thank you everyone for joining us again. Hopefully we've got some continuing members coming on in, and if you're new here, welcome. We're going to cover all sorts of different information tonight, but I'm just going to kick it off by introducing Poultry Industry Council. So I'm Ashley Honsberger. I'm the Executive Director for PIC, and we're working together with the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs to continue the conversation around keeping folks informed on the high-path avian influenza situation in Ontario, with specifically a small flock focus. So funding was provided through the Canadian Ag Partnership to make this happen. So I'm going to keep the resource sharing short tonight because we've stockpiled a whole ton of interesting links and resources for everyone. They're on our website, so poultryindustrycouncil.ca. We'll share that in the chat in a moment. Under our biosecurity and disease page, you're going to find all sorts of stuff. And specifically, you're going to find at the very bottom of that page some of the resources and information about biosecurity. So this has been a conversation that we've been having for a little while now about how that's the first line of defense for keeping your flock safe from HPAI. So for small flock owners, though, it looks a little bit different than commercial. So here I've got two resources highlighted. The one on the left is the Omafra fact sheet. And so it's really targeted towards the backyard flocks or the small flocks. So it talks about some of the different ways you can engage in the biosecurity on your property. But if you want a little more information, it is a bigger scale. You can click on the biosecurity cards. So they look like this. They go through vehicles and equipment for personnel. So they talk a little bit about clothing and boots and keeping your vehicles clean and those sorts of things. So while it might not directly apply 100%, I think there's a lot of good ideas that you can maybe take away and start implementing on your property. And so once again, just talking about how it's a bit of a stressful time, particularly if you have, flocks that are being affected or you're in one of the affected zones. So if you're finding that it's becoming a bit of a challenge to carry that mental load by yourself, this is a really excellent resource that's been developed recently specifically for the agriculture community. So this is also available on that biosecurity webpage. So I'll just go through who's joining us tonight. Of course, we've got Victoria Wilson joining from CFIA with a bit of an update. Dr. Luci Rosca is going to give a sort of a broader picture across Ontario and Canada. Dr. Brian Stevens is going to talk to us about turkey vultures and what's going on there. In the background, we've got Charlotte from the PIC team, as well as Dr. Emily Martin, who joins us from the Ontario Animal Health Network. So what I will say is, if you do have questions, please put them into the Q&A and we'll hold the questions to the end. So we're going to hear the updates, then have the questions. We've been pretty good about getting through all of them within the hour update. And beyond that, if you have any other questions or concerns, you're welcome to reach out to the PIC team. So now I'm just going to invite Victoria to join and get going.
Thank you, Ashley. Thanks for having me, everyone. Happy to come on and continue the conversation and give you all an update on where we're at. It has been a busy week. I would like to reference the website. Since the last time we spoke, there's been 3 additional sites added that we refer to as IPs or infected premises. So we're up to a total of 19 confirmed IPs here in Ontario. We've quarantined all sites and response actions are underway. The maps are not currently up to date with 18 and 19, but our team is working to get those uploaded for you. They're updated when new IPs are added and or a new primary control zone is developed. So continue to watch for that map as well. I will highlight that within those maps, they're separated out into 2 control zones. Within those zones, there is a primary control zone, which outlines the approximately 10-kilometer buffer. And then there's the infected zone, which is the approximate minimum of 3-kilometer buffer. The importance with this is it has different restrictions and requirements. The entire primary control zones control movement of poultry in, out, and through those zones. So I will flag one for sure. Within an infected zone, it is prohibited for the placement of poultry. A few new additions to this, though, is that the consideration of placement of commercial birds within the infected zone of what we consider IP2, IP3, IP6, and IP10, which can be referenced on our map, are in addition to the infected premise 1 that we spoke to last week. So we're allowing placements there. This would be done through our movement and permitting group. They'll be better able to direct you on the conditions that would be needed to be met to place within the infected zone of the previous mentioned. I will bring to the attention the category of small holding poultry, which would be referred to as under 300 birds for non-commercial purpose, is still prohibited at this time. But again, if there's any specific questions, reach out to the movement control group. The remaining IPs are still prohibited for movement of live birds into the restricted zones. The map is designed to have an address feature where you can enter your address and it'll drop an X into the map, which should help you determine where you are in the broad primary control zone or if you're in the infected zone. Our website is continually being updated to provide further clarity based on the feedback we receive, and we're trying to make it easier and more user-friendly for everybody. There's also tables available for what type of permits are required for these movements. This is available for you, you're viewing on our website there. As well, the phone number and email address to reach our permitting group to help set up the movement of birds, eggs, hatching eggs within, through and out of the zones is there for your use as well. I would like to also spread awareness that it is spreading across the globe at this point, and we're seeing lots of action. So anybody with farm animals must practice good biosecurity habits to protect poultry and prevent disease. For those of you who may not have attended this update last week, there's some really great resources on our CFIA website. They highlight a lot of good information and designed specifically for owners of backyard flocks and pet birds. If you just take a look on our website, there's 4 documents and links available for 5 rules to prevent and detect disease in backyard flocks and pet birds. We have a protect your flock from bird flu, a general producer guide, and on-farm biosecurity standards, and a national avian on-farm biosecurity standards as well. A lot of good information for backyard flocks and some detailed information on biosecurity if you are interested. We do respond to sick bird calls, high mortality calls, and our sampling teams follow up with these as they do come in. So please continue to check back with the website as we continue to navigate this situation. Our permitting group is working to grant permits as they come in, and this has been going very well since the beginning so far. And obviously there will be some bumps and hiccups, but overall, the process is running smoothly. So if you have any questions surrounding movement of live birds, I encourage that you reach out to the number or email on our website to get the most up-to-date answers on all of your permitting questions. Again, lots going on as always. I'll leave it at this broad update for our current situation here.
Thank you, Victoria. I also referenced my sticky notes and realized I forgot to mention that we of course have Al Dam, our provincial poultry specialist, joining us. He's going to round out the list of speakers, but now we've got Dr. Luci Rosca who's going to give us an update.
Good evening, everyone. So I will, as usual, I will provide you some updates about the outbreaks of avian influenza H5N1. And I will start with Ontario outbreaks. As Victoria mentioned, we do have about 19 premises being infected. Out of those, there are 4 small flocks premises. That includes ducks, layers, chickens, guinea fowls, and geese. And we do have 15 commercial premises infected. 6 were ducks, 5 were turkeys, 2 layers, and 2 broilers, comprising of over 256,000 birds affected. As part of Canada, this is a table that is being taken from CFIA website and it gets updated every Thursday. So I do have one from last week. As you can see, there are 7 provinces being affected, and 2 in Newfoundland, Labrador, and then 4 in Nova Scotia that they are previously infected premises and they're being released. We have a total of 35 premises being infected as a last Thursday, and a total of birds of over 700,000. In terms of poultry detection of avian influenza in the United States, they have confirmed about 235 confirmed flocks in 29 affected states. Among these 235, 155 are commercial flocks and 80 are backyard flocks. The number of birds affected are over 31 million at this as of April 23rd. As far as, so I put up two maps to show you the distribution based on the type of the flocks being affected in the United States. And on the left side, you do have the backyard flocks, and you can see they're widespread over North America versus commercial flocks by state, and they kind of differ between the two. The next slide, these are two maps, 1 month, almost 1 month apart. This shows up how many commercial and non-commercial poultry and wild birds being affected back in March 27 versus a month later, with a lot of popping events on the map. I just want to remind you about the minister's order. It's still in place until May the 9th, and the ministry is doing a risk assessment at this point, and they will update us about it if they are going to prolong that or they're going to stop the ministry's order to avoid commingling of the birds. That's all I have so far.
Thank you, Lucy. So again, any questions, just feel free to pop them into the Q&A at the bottom. Anybody who's dialing in using their phone, you're welcome to press *9. That lets us know that you have your hand up and we can connect with you to get your question answered. So now we're going to have Dr. Brian Stevens join us on the wild bird update.
Thanks, Ashley. First thing I just want to do is bring up a Cfia dashboard. So this is something that if you're looking to see what's going on with wild birds going forward, this is a site that you can go to, and that should be going up in the chat in a minute. And on here, you should be able to look on the map and zoom in on different regions to see where wild birds are being affected across Canada. Up to this point, they were mainly putting the confirmed positives, so the H5N1 confirmed cases, but they're going to start putting up the preliminary positive cases, so the H5 positives, onto this map within the next week or two. So this map should be updated on a regular basis going forward. So if you want to check it out on a real-time basis, this is a website to go to for that. The other thing I wanted to mention today was just a difference in the species that we're seeing affected by this. So previously when I talked on here, we had discussed how Canada geese and bald eagles were the main ones that we were seeing. But over the past couple of weeks, we've seen a sharp uptick in the number of turkey vultures that are being affected by this. Not a huge surprise, as that is a scavenger species. So presumably these birds are scavenging on either dead poultry or dead waterfowl and becoming infected that way. And interestingly enough, we've also had our first corvid. So we had a crow test positive as well, and they're another species that will be a scavenger species. So that's something to keep in mind, that we're starting to see it move out of our water birds and waterfowl and out of some of these raptor species into more of the scavenger species that are being affected by this as well. And I definitely can take any questions at the end of this, if anybody has anything about wild birds.
Thank you, Brian. That's a great resource you shared. And now we're going to have Al Dam, our poultry specialist.
Yes, thank you, Ashley. So yes, it's your favorite poultry specialist again tonight. And it's Brian's talk is actually a good segue about some of the things I brought up a couple weeks ago. So one specifically is how you manage your dead stocks, whether you have poultry or anything else on your property. If you're not managing it properly with turkey vultures and scavengers now on this list of high path AI birds, you are inviting avian influenza onto your farm. I think you need to look at it that way. Same with any wild bird interaction, right? So, you know, I'm hearing a lot of folks doing things like changing your boots and making sure you have separate things for where the coop is, and then they let their ducks go to the pond. So you just blew your foot right off there with that one. So let's just keep reminding ourselves, dead stock is an issue, wild birds are an issue. And another thing that has now come up is the turkey hunt. So the turkey hunt started yesterday. We hopefully have a lot more eyes and ears out there in the field. So another reminder that if you're out there hunting turkeys and you're starting to see a lot of weird things with birds, either neurological or clusters of dead birds, to let Brian know, because there is a pile of things that are happening out there in the field with the movement of this disease from some of the migratory to the non-migratory, and that is going to be a concern for us. One of the other issues that has come up that I've been asked about is folks that are selling birds, and I saw this in chat. I'm going to jump in on that because I know Tori answered it, but if you're selling poultry, starter chicks, whatever, one, you really shouldn't be right off the top, right? Because we're pretty much in a poultry lockdown. But let's say you are, and you go high path AI positive. Guess what? And I think Tori mentioned this. We go back, they will go back 21 days into your sales to figure out who else you've sold to, and we will be digging up those contacts to make sure that you haven't spread avian influenza to them, or that maybe one of them brought avian influenza to your farm. So once again, is it really worth creating a whole bunch more IPs? Of the last 3 IPs we had in the last week, 2 of them were small flock. So this is not a commercial bird problem. You folks that keep saying this is a commercial bird problem, I want to reach out and strangle you practically through the computer or through some of the social media posts that we see. This is not, and I don't know how many more times we can say this, but let's just be aware that this is not going to go away. And if behaviors that are going to continue to cause this disease to spread continue, we're not going to get through this at all. So anyways, it's kind of in your hands at this point. We are trying to hunt down how this gets on site. We're still seeing a lot of point infections, so keep safe. If you are out turkey hunting and you have birds at home, please make sure you do everything you can to segregate your hunting equipment from your flock. And if you think you're doing a good job or a great job with biosecurity, fantastic, but think of ways that you can keep improving it. We've seen this in the commercial side. We've got folks that are reevaluating everything they're doing to the point where, on multi-barn complexes, they only have one person going into that barn. Equipment is being rented so that each farm location has its own equipment, whether that's skid steers or even just buying extra shovels or rakes or whatever equipment you might need. This is going to be a very impactful spring and hopefully not summer for us. But anyways, just like I said, I can't reiterate enough how crazy things are getting, and I just want to make sure that we get out of this on the other side. So be mindful of your birds, be mindful of other folks. If you see folks that have maybe not heard, and I don't know how you could not have heard about avian influenza in Ontario, tell them to come to this Tuesday night. Send them the infographic that Ashley's got posted from one, and just do your best to protect your flock and everyone else's flock, because those zones are going to be an issue. So with that, anyways, that's my rant for tonight, Ashley, until I get mad about something else.
We'll find something else to upset you, don't worry. Okay, so once again, if you have a question, maybe just avoid the chat because there's a lot of chat happening, and pop it right into that question and answer at the bottom. We did have one come in earlier today via email. We'll just knock out first. So this person's saying, I'm wondering, once a control zone is established, how long it stays labeled as such. For example, PCZ01 was one of the first zones and it still shows up on the map. So is there a length of time that those zones are established for, or what is the criteria that warrants them being removed from the listing? I think that's a Victoria question.
That's a Tori question.
Yeah, so there's a ton of criteria to kind of go through for removal of the zones. We're definitely not looking into that currently, as there are still sites coming up. Removal of the zones is difficult. I think it's a far-fetched process right now that we haven't really had a lot of conversations on, and definitely still in the works to try and figure out how to release these zones safely to avoid the spread, because it is currently still spreading widely through our wild bird population. So I think it's a topic for down the road that I might be able to better discuss when we have some more information on that.
Okay.
Actually, I was going to say, if you go back to, which one was it? Was it the March 10th webinar we did? I think one of the CFI veterinarians actually had a discussion as to the timeline of how long things take. Like, but essentially, it could come down to months, right? Depending upon the C&D.
Between 2 to 3 months. That's what I understand. And then if you look at the table that is released by CFIA, only Newfoundland and Nova Scotia had the release of their infected zones. And the first one we had in December 24th or 21st. So that was a while ago. And we're in April right now, so up to 3 months at least.
Okay. So a question related to municipalities. So some municipalities are getting ready for backyard flock pilot programs. Are these able to continue launching?
Well, I'd say if you're in a control zone, nope. Right? If you're in that 0 to 10K zone, that would probably not be a good. Well, you can't, right? Because you can't get a permit in there from CFIA. Should they otherwise? It's a good question. Because if there is a positive in town, then they will have to go through the whole thing with Tori. I know she's great to work with, but they'll be asking questions that you'll have to provide answers for.
And it's pending from where you're going to get the birds as well, the chicks. And it's depending on if we will still have the order at the time when you would like to do the placement. The minister's order, the Ontario minister's order.
Okay. Is there any concern with bats being impacted by HPAI? Someone has recently found a dead bat on their property.
Yeah, I saw a question like that, and it's spring right now. And then with animal welfare branch that I'm working with, we do have a lot of calls about bats that they were found dead. Mostly we're concerned about rabies. We're concerned about it maybe starving, coming out from the winter, the hibernation. So it can be a lot of conditions that the bats can be found dead. I would not probably be specific more for avian influenza, but maybe Brian has more.
Yeah, so I haven't heard of avian influenza in bats. Typically, when you see any sort of jump over into mammalian species, it's going to be animals that have some sort of contact with waterfowl or poultry, and bats are typically not going to fall in that category. Lucy mentioned a few reasons that bats may die. The other thing I'll mention too is that we're coming into the time of year when a number of young bats are going to be coming around, and we do see a lot of juvenile mortality in bats during the spring. So that is something just to be aware of. Definitely contact us if you have questions about any dead bats that you're finding, but don't be surprised if we turn away a number of dead bats, because we expect to hear about a lot of individual young dead bats coming up over the next few months.
Okay. And just remind us, Brian, is one dead bird on my property a concern, or is there sort of a threshold there?
So if it's a waterfowl, raptor, anything big like that, then yes, definitely give us a call. But songbirds, wait until there's 3 or more in a short period of time before you give us a shout. Or if there's something really unusual about that bird where it seems to be really neurological, definitely give us a call.
That's awesome. And can you tell us a little more about the turkey vulture situation? How many might be affected in the province?
Yeah, so I mean, that's going to be hard for me to say for certain, but I can tell you the ones that we've seen right now. We had our first turkey vulture a few weeks back, and over the past 2 weeks, I think we've had 6 more. So it definitely has jumped in number very quickly. And I expect that we're going to see a number of additional turkey vultures over the next few weeks, but it's went from pretty much none to already 6 in the past week or 2.
Okay.
And Brian, where are you seeing these? Like in terms of not just geographic, but when we saw them, I know one of the ones I was involved with, it was in a roosting site. Is that where you're?
That's what we're hearing the most about, is a number of turkey vultures being found at the base of hedges or trees where they've been roosting. So these vultures are making it back to the roosting site and then succumbing to the disease once they're at their roosting site.
Okay. So a question about if you're declared in an infected site and you don't have the space to bury the stock, the bedding, and the feed, what happens, or what are your options? Does it get hauled away?
I can speak to this one a little bit. It's a difficult one to answer. We tackle these specific challenges on a case-by-case basis. So if you do end up having an infected premise and you don't have the space, there can be conversations had for alternate ways to dispose of the feed, the bedding, the stock as well.
Okay.
But I guess maybe we'll back up a little bit. The standard way that we deal with it, though, how do we deal with that on a commercial site, Tori?
A lot of sites they use composting methods, so where they build piles within the barns, and they have to bring them up to a certain temperature for a certain amount of days based on scientific expertise there. So yeah, they have to be brought up to temperature for a certain amount of days and then probed each day to ensure that they are staying at that temperature, to ensure that we are mitigating the risk of disease transmission. And then after that, I believe it's scooped out of the barn and it goes into another composting pile and for further composting as well.
Yeah. That will include, as the question says, it'll include livestock or dead stock, bedding, feed, potentially eggs too, if it's a laying operation. It's all the infectious materials that we want to heat treat.
Yes, bedding can be used as a source of nitrogen to compose, to put the compost together. It's a 75 to 25%. So
Can you just comment as well a little bit about, like, let's say it's a small flock with a wooden barn. Is there any concern about any of the housing materials being infected? Like, can it live in wood? Does it live in plastic?
Well, part of you becoming declared avian influenza free is not only dealing with the infected material, but the C&D of the site, right? So that's a bit of a challenge based on, once again, as Tori said, site to site basis.
Okay.
We haven't had a game bird, we haven't had outdoor housed birds of mass quantities being impacted yet. The organic industry is really struggling on this one, but yeah, like if we can clean and disinfect it, we can release it. But if you've got an old barn that's full of holes from the darkling beetles, that C&D process will be quite difficult, to the point where burning it to ash might be your solution. And that has been done in the past.
Okay. So this is a question for Brian. Just a question about sort of crowdsourcing the reporting of sick or dead birds through apps like Merlin Bird ID or anything like that. Is that at play, or is kind of funneling it into your hotline and then centralizing that information? How is that working out?
Yeah, so the best way to report is funneling it to us. Ideally, we would be able to tap into that, but unfortunately, we're a very small organization and we just don't have the capacity to monitor apps or anything like that. So definitely, if you're in communities like that and you hear about anything, any sick or dead birds, then please funnel those people towards us so they can contact us. And I did also want to mention too, I know I said 6 or 7 turkey vultures, which doesn't seem like much, but on average, I get 1 or 2 a year. So the fact that we've already had 7 in the past few weeks is much more than we typically see for turkey vultures overall.
And I guess the other reason to call CWHC too, is that if we're starting to see large amounts of die-off, that CWHC can triage those calls to make the best use of the resource too, right? Because it's
Al's frozen, so we will move on. In my area, we have a large flock of ducks, 50 plus outdoors. Should this flock be kept inside? We're also seeing lots of turkey vultures and ravens circulating locally. Maybe Luci, you can head that up.
Sure. I know they're ducks and then they need to be outside, but consider that if it's environmental contamination from the wild birds,
you're
contaminated. Sorry, did someone else said something?
It's Al. I'm just gonna mute him until he's back.
Okay, so if you do have an option to keep the birds inside, I will do that. And then try to make sure that the water access and the feed access to the wild birds areas are restricted.
Okay. All right. I have a small flock of rare breed turkeys. Is there any way to apply for an exemption from destruction in order to preserve the genetics?
Unfortunately, I don't know of any way to apply for an exemption for any reasons. If you are on an infected premise, it's declared an infected premise, and then you get an order of destruction. Unfortunately, destruction does need to occur. There isn't a way around that, unfortunately.
Thank you. Sorry, we lost you there, Al.
Yeah, no, my VPN kicked out and I disappeared.
Yes. Is there something else you wanted to add from what you were saying previously, or are we?
Nope, Brian's amazing.
He is. So a question, any sign of clustering of the farm so far indicative of wind transmission, or any other insights or comments on how we might think this is transmitting?
So I'm going to start the answer the question, but the other colleagues can intervene as well. So it is for the virus to get transmitted, it needs a organic matter to be attached to. So wind is not going to transmit the virus for a very long distance. It is a possibility, but for short distance, yes. If it is embedded into like droplets of anything that will support its resistance to not be destroyed.
Part of the challenge is we've seen what we think is point source infections at this point, but you know, a thing like an auction could spread it extremely well, right? The commingling, that's why we have the order in place. But as Mike Petrick said a number of weeks ago, think of it spread kind of like magic, because we probably will not find how it got into most sites unless we can start testing, like figuring out where the biosecurity lapses are. So I think at that point, I don't think you should even worry about how it spreads, just know that it is spreading.
Okay. So we have a question about the racing pigeon community. Is there any hope we'll be able to start our racing in Ontario in May?
Steve, I don't think you should hold your breath. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you. It depends if we see a drop in cases, I guess, is the main thing. And are we seeing that decrease in the US and the rest of the country? I'm not seeing that.
Right.
If you want to discuss that, Steve, you can reach out to us later.
Okay, last call for any other questions that folks might have. Any of our panelists want to have a closing comment on what we should think about as we go through the rest of the week? Luci?
I will keep saying the same thing. Keep your flock protected, biosecurity, make sure that you're not doing the human error or bringing the virus in a barn where with a flock, but just consider every single possibility of transmission of this virus.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just reiterate that we're seeing in many species of wild birds out there. So definitely do your best to protect your flocks from the wild birds, because it is definitely on the landscape and it's going through a number of them right now.
Okay. Murray, any closing comments that you can share with us? You've been involved in some commercial side as well. Any learnings we could take away?
I'm just going to say biosecurity is your #1 best friend at this time.
Right. Yep, and all the resources are kind of funneled onto our website, so it's helpful to bone up a little bit. It's part of our responsibility as being flock owners.
Yep. I got one last thing to say. So think of what you can do and think about how you can do it better. Right? Tori is absolutely right. Biosecurity is your best friend, but you can always do it better. We need to tighten up as much as we can. Keep your birds safe, stay in lockdown. Tori does not want to doesn't want to visit any of you people.
Nothing personal. Brian, where can we find information about the other bird species that are found as far as the positives, wild bird species?
So eventually that will go up on that Cfia dashboard. If you want a list, I mean, I can just name a number. So we've seen it in Canada geese, we've seen in snow geese, we've seen in ring-billed gulls, green-winged teals, red-breasted merganser, bald eagles, snowy owls, great horned owls, red-tailed hawks, crows. Now there's probably a number that I'm missing from my list, but it's been a number of different water birds, raptors, and now our first corvid.
Okay, pretty broad spectrum.
Yep. For you hunters out there, like you said, you're another set of eyes for us, for CWHC, and for us to see what might be out there. And anyone who's, out in the conservation areas, the great green yonder, keep an eye out for us, along with citizen science and everything else. We don't know how in trouble we are without knowing what species are impacted, and that's where Brian is really playing an important role.
I don't know
CWHC.
if Brian mentioned the fox, the new.
No, so I mean, we have a preliminary on a fox right now, but we're still waiting on confirmation from that.
Alan, I'm not too clear on what your question is here. If you could just clarify that. And while Alan's just tidying up his question, offering a little more detail, I will just say the biggest thing that folks online right now can do to help us is share the link to our Tuesday updates to kind of spread. There's a ton of backyard flocks. I think, Al, the number you bandied about was about 25,000 folks in Ontario might have backyard flocks. That's a lot more than is online tonight. So if there's any way you could share with a friend, put it in your Facebook bird groups and stuff like that, we'd really appreciate getting the word out and amplifying some of this messaging. So,
and sorry, yes, Brian did say fox, not FOX, not flocks.
oh, okay.
I just got a text about that going, is it preliminary on a fox, not flocks? Yeah, no, fox, FOX, the little red ones.
Yeah, we're monitoring many different species, and it's been reported on red foxes in Europe. And there's actually a report on raccoon dogs in Japan, which are another canid species. So there's a number of carnivores that we're watching in right now.
Okay, I think that's all we've got for everyone tonight. Thanks again to our presenters and diligently sharing with us every Tuesday. Thanks to everyone who joined us online. And we'll see you